installment of April's webinar, and today's focus is going to be on actually hitting the recording button because I forgot that last week.
Again, this now.
Got that going. And I've got the gallery view. We've got the whole thing. Okay. And today's focus is going to be on cash flow planning, especially for businesses. And this doesn't, my focus is on small businesses, but, this can apply for basically all kinds of businesses. This takes from years of my background as essentially a head of finance, doing a lot of financial planning and analytics for very large and also very small companies and anything in between. And so, again, I am grateful that you are here today joining me on this webinar. I promised you one last one next week, which will be on budgeting for personal finance. We'll see where this thing goes. When this thing started, I wanted to do, 5 webinars for the month of April, and really support people in this time of change and transition. And so what does that look like for me? I haven't, really thought that through yet. And so definitely do stay tuned on my Instagram. I will definitely start posting, after I have some thought to kind of how I can continue to support people for personal finance and small businesses. So today is going to be about cash flow. And so, really we're going to go into sort of what is the definition, why is it important, the actual steps of actually creating a cash flow plan, and sort of some tips around cash flow planning. And so cash flow in its very simplest term is essentially how the cash moves in and out of your operating bank accounts. And what happens is, it really does establish a cycle for your business. And why it is so important, obviously, I think you've heard me say this numerous times, is that cash is king, right? Especially at this point where we are in this particular cycle of our business. And honestly, I see in one of my passion in supporting small businesses is that people business owners don't fail because the idea wasn't great or that their product wasn't beautiful or whatever it is. It really is business fail because they run out of money. And so, really when I started Solve Your Books, I really thought about how can I prevent and support people to not run out of money and to really help them understand that they have control over the economics of their business. And so, cash not only is where we don't want to get to a point where we run out of cash, but also it funds our future growth, right? Without cash, it's really hard to make future investments in your business, whether that would be in equipment that you need or in people that you need to expand and grow. And it also, obviously, at this point, cash is the most flexible tool that you have, right? When all else fails, when the revenue streams come, when the expenses are continue coming in and you're having to pay people, having cash on hand is essentially such a flexible tool that you can use for however you want to. And so, right now, I think of cash flow planning is really, really important because it allows you to plan ahead, right? And look at what point is there going to be an issue in the future, and then allow us to be proactive. Right? A lot of times small business owners are reactionary. We get to a point where we're running out of cash and we're scrambling to put things together and we get into debt that is higher than normal. Get you, what I always say, we always want to fundraise from a point of strength, and point of strength for small businesses is when we have cash. It's amazing how when you have cash and you have, you can then establish credit. And then when you can establish credit, then you can establish large, and how you deal with that credit allows you for larger amounts of credits for your cash flow to actually happen. And, so really, I think, the stress of really cash flow planning is so important, and for us to be able to be proactive in our business. And so how does cash flow planning actually work, right? And the first thing I always say is know your numbers. And so, I started Solve Your Books. It's a bookkeeping and accounting company, not only because I love numbers personally, right? I love dealing with them. I love analyzing them. I just love Excel to death, and I love QuickBooks, right? But really, when I thought about how, as I was going to support entrepreneurs, really having good financial data is always your first step. And so, and I also understand the impacts of having good financial data versus not having good financial data. So a lot of clients will come to me with, I haven't done my books for 2 years, or I only do them once a year when tax time comes. That actually does not allow you to know much about your business. So one of the things we establish is a good relationship with our numbers, right? With our business numbers. And what I love about cash flow planning, in particular about knowing your numbers, is you have to know every single aspect of your business. Because essentially, sometimes people will focus on sales, incoming, and they're just letting the outflow, become much more increased than their revenue can actually support. And so they're in that jam of, money coming hand to mouth, as I like to call it. And really, though, what cash flow does is essentially it's a tool that pulls everything together, so what your incomings are and what your outgoings are, right? And really, it allows you to see, and more importantly, establish the muscle of projections, right? Just starting to really sort of understand, what is my cycle? So if you own an e-commerce business and you're selling, that there is, a certain market in the holiday season, or if you're selling something that's related to, Mother's Day, or if you're selling something to, you start to see and understand a particular cycle to your business, right? And so if you're a photographer, and you do a wedding, right? Your heaviest season is between April and in California all year, I feel like. But really, it's sort of April through October, some shape or form, right? And so really it's sort of understanding, those cycles of incoming and then what your outflows are. And so one of the things is, interestingly enough, the first thing I always ask is sort of, well, what's your revenue model, right? What is your incoming stream look like? And for the most part, it's actually something that we really struggle as small business owners. We're sort of like, well, I have this project, and then I have that project, and then I have this project, and then I have this, and then I'm selling this, and then I have that. So all of it is really to put that into place, right? So if you're an e-commerce company that sells product, when people actually buy it online, you're getting that cash 2 to 3 days, which is pretty immediate, right? But if you're an e-commerce company that has a wholesale, right, that revenue might come in 30 days, or it might come in 7 days, depending on what terms you've given your customers. Or if you are a service company, you definitely have terms, right? And so you've signed a contract, you are, understanding that you're not, you might do something for the month of April, and then you might bill them at the end, right? And so you're sort of 1 month lag. And really understanding what it is that you are actually being paid and how does your money actually flow in, right? And it's really, really important because a lot of times we set these things up months ago, years ago, and we don't really review it and think about it, about the inflow. And a lot of times, as small business owners, I ask this, and I ask this a lot of time, and it might sound harsh. And the question I ask is, are you a nonprofit or are you a business, right? Meaning, are you in it to actually make money, right, and generate cash for you as a business owner, or are you a nonprofit? Meaning, like, this is sort of a hobby, and you really sort of, are doing it just because you have time on your hands, right? Because, that is a very different mindset that we have versus, when you're a business owner versus a hobby, right? And so one of the things I always establish is, if you really want this to be a successful business that generates cash for you, and it's a business, then this is something that you need to do for it, right? And so, those are understanding your ins, right? So what are some of the outs? And we all know that, like, probably more often than not, what our outs are, because when we run out of cash and we have to pay a vendor of some sort, we're like, right? And so what are those things? And usually payroll. And for small business owners, I always say you need to include yourself in this portion, whether it's, you call it an owner's compensation, you call it a distribution, you actually pay yourself on payroll, right? Because when we think about businesses, yes, a lot of us do it out of, I'll say, the kindness of our hearts, or sort of our passion, our purpose. But at the end of the day, this is a business. And if you are not working, if you are working in the business and you're not getting paid, that can only last for so long before it's not a sustainable chain of reactions, right? And so a lot of times I've worked with clients where they pay everyone else before they pay themselves. And then they pay themselves only after the remaining of all the other stuff that went through their cash flow. And so sometimes that might be $500 a month, and sometimes that may be $5,000 a month. And that inconsistency causes your personal finances to be in a, I'll just say, shit show, right? Because you don't have consistency to actually live on. What does that create? That creates scarcity, and that creates anxiety within your own personal life, right? So now this business is paying everyone else, and it's not doing anything for you. And so really, when we think about, I teach a lot in personal finance about paying yourself first, and this applies for small business owners, right? We are oftentimes the only person in our business, or we might have a few contractors, and or vendors, or we're paying the utility bill, we're paying the cell phone, la da da da, before we actually take care of ourselves. And then we're drawing from our savings to live. That only lasts for a certain amount of time, right? Unless you have some sort of partner that can counterbalance that and support you and the family while you guys are going through this. Okay. So, so again, owner's compensation, payroll, contractors, right? All the outs are rent. And really, so for business owners, we put almost everything on credit card. And so it's a one large bill payment that goes out for the credit card. And that may be, your software, it might be your cell phone charge. Nowadays, there seems to be like 5 softwares or 10 softwares for any business to actually, run, right? And so really then understanding, okay, what is coming in and what is going out, right? And so you need to know your numbers really, really well. And so step 2, like, how do we actually make this calculation, right? And so what we do is we take our current cash. And I always do this on a Monday. What is my start of the week? That could be a Sunday for you. For me, I like to know exactly what I started on Monday and what I'm ending on Sunday. This makes logical sense for me. That's the way I operate. Um, and so I like to do these exercises week by week. A lot of times, I, I own a bookkeeping company. I report to my clients on a monthly basis, right? But truthfully, for all the other clients, a lot of them hire me for doing their cash plan analytics. And I do this on a week by week basis. Because what happens is by the time you get that financial statement, it's a little too late, right? And so when we do week by week, we can really see, okay, I just did this for a client of mine, and I did an 8-week analysis, and I saw that week 7, we weren't going to have any incomings. And then guess what? That's when their payroll and their Amex bills were due, right? And so you have a huge outflow without any inflows. And so really, when you look week by week, you are then really able to then say, okay, if this is going to be week 7 and this is what's happening, what do I do from week 1 to 6 to really make sure that, number one, I have enough for payroll, because employees are not really happy when you don't pay them. That's against the law. Or contractors, right? People that work for you, or yourself, right? Include yourself in that. Your landlord and your personal, happiness and health is contingent on needs support from the business, right? And so really what we start with Monday, let's say an example, I have $1,000 in the bank right now, right? And for that week, I am projecting, I am thinking about what my expected cash inflow is, not some, hopeful number. And so what I usually do is, if you own a service company, what I usually do is say, okay, you know what, that invoice was due this Monday, but honestly, people may or may not pay on time. And so I give myself a little leeway, like maybe they won't pay until the Monday after. And this gets to know your customers really well, right? So if you're a service company and you have terms with your customers, there's a pattern, right? Certain customers always pay on day 20. Certain customers always pay on day 30. Certain customers are always on 37 days, right? Even if your terms is 30. And so really understanding, like, okay, what cash am I getting in? And if you're an e-commerce company, expecting what the sales for that week can be, right? And so if you're going, well, how do I do that? That's when historicals become really important. Even if you took, let's say, the lowest of the average in the last few weeks, is it that, and this gets into really knowing the patterns of your particular business. And what I find is, the pattern when I ask questions like, how is March usually? Usually people will say, yeah, March is usually sort of a slow month because da, 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 da. And all I'm doing is taking that information and putting it into a plan, so you don't have to be surprised, because that information is just not laid out in a way that you are expecting it to be. Okay. And so, and what we do is, like, because of the certain COVID conditions, we might have to, say, like, April is really usually a phenomenal month. Maybe you do a big thing for spring break or Easter or whatever April's, festivities might be. But that there's, things that are uncontrollable for you right now. So we might take a discount. You might say, usually my April sales are X, or my weekly sales are X, but it's going to be X minus 20% or 40% or some amount, because I'm seeing that I'm usually like this, and then now in March it's sort of going like this, right? There's going to be established some sort of new normal. And then what we want to do is, you starting balance, you add what's your incoming, and then you're going to subtract what is outgoing, right? And so if you have contractors that are always paid on Mondays, deduct that, right? Or if you know that payrolls always go on, if you're on running payrolls, if you're paying your employees on the 15th and the last day of the month, that cash goes out of your bank account 3 to 5 days before that, depending on what payroll service you do, right? Your credit card payment is on a cycle, right? Exactly on the 22nd of every month, that credit card payment is due. And so you lay it out unusually, right, for a 6 to 8 week span. And this is because, your business can change very fast. So doing much longer than that is sometimes really unhelpful. And you're just sort of like guessing at that point, right? But 6 to 8 weeks allows you to have essentially 2 cycles of your expenses. And that allows you to see, what? My income is going to be higher or lower. Okay, got that data point. Now, is my expenses aligned with that? And if it's not, we make an immediate change, right? Like, it's not wait until the bill comes and then go, oh, yeah, no, I can't pay that, right? It's, I see where my cash might be and what can I do? Like, if my sales is lower, how can I'm not going to be able to support these expenses, right? So how can I have negotiation of whatever it is, the tough conversations that we may or may not want to have. And all of this is really then, making you aware of what's about to happen so that we can take action today. Because the truth is that, most people just want to know, right? If your contractors are going to not be paid, or if they're going to be going on retainer, or maybe you need to discount their service for a period of time, or your landlord needs to defer, whatever it is, you want to have that conversation as early as possible. All people want is communication, right? And so what does that mean? So in our example, we started $1,000. Now, maybe you expected $500 to come in, and then in that week, you expected $1,000 to go out, right? And so now your ending cash for that Sunday is $500. Next week, you start with 500 and you go through the exercise again and again and again for a 6 to 8 week span. And so, really, what I love about this exercise, and what I always ask my clients to do, is we have control over our financial future, right? Finances do not control us, we control it. This cash flow tool allows you to create your future. You don't need someone to tell you your numbers at the end of the month. That's great to have, absolutely, right? But what you need is an ability to say, I'm going to create my future. Because for that client, when week 7 was had no income, we immediately say, okay, what project do I need to go out and get? What, if you have a team, what do I need my team members to do, right? So that we can generate sales. If you're an e-commerce company and you see that your sales are starting to decline week by week, not wait until the end of the month, you know it's happening, do something about that, right? Whether it's offer promotions or whether it's doing collaborations, because as we know, things take a little bit of time, right? And so offering discounts, obviously, you can do that fairly quickly, but right, if you wanted to collaborate, if you wanted to, offer anything, or if you wanted to get your email marketing, all that stuff takes a little bit of time, and it takes, but what it does is start your creativity engine, right? We want to create our own financial future. And so a lot of times when, I've had clients that their entire revenue stream has completely been shattered by this COVID-19, I've asked them, what are the alternatives? Let's think about it, right? It's like, this DJ nice guy who I've been, jamming to every night when I'm doing my, bookkeeping. It's like, he creatively thought of, well, I have all this equipment at home. Why don't I just do what I do best? I'm not getting paid anyway, right? And that garnered him so much publicity and so much. I mean, Michelle Obama was on there, right? Um, and so, really, the idea of sort of how can we not let what we can't control, right, define our business, right? And really start thinking creatively. Okay, what are my alternatives? I see this projection and I do not like it. What am I going to do right now? Right? How can I actually make a change? And so, um, I'll go through this one more time, right? So it's essentially, if you just and I do this literally in Google Sheets. Of course, you can do it in Excel, right? And it's just beginning cash. What are my expected incoming? What is my expected outgoing? And then what is my ending, right? Your ending is then the next week's beginning, and you go through that cycle 6 to 8 weeks. Now, and so really that lays out really cleanly in a spreadsheet 8 weeks of your future, right? So tips and what do you do with that information while you have it, right? And I've talked a little bit about it, but one is be on top of collections. If you are a service provider, what is happening is everybody is tightening, yeah? And so everybody's like, oh, I don't know if I have cash to pay you, right? Oh, this is the time you're going to be on them. It's uncomfortable, right? But what's the alternative? The alternative is that you don't get paid, that you don't get fed, that your contractors and your employees are not being paid. And so if this is an opportunity for you to strengthen those collection muscles, now is the time, right? And so, this is something where I see a lot of service providers, when times are tough, they're sort of like, oh, I don't want to talk to my client. It's really uncomfortable. And they just let it ride. I once picked up a new client and collected over $400,000 in receivables that had just been sitting out there because they were uncomfortable with collecting, right? So think about that. And so what I always say is where we are is a great place to practice, right? And so when our business gets to the millions of dollars and we need to collect on $400,000 because it's gotten to that point, you've already learned, right? Take this as a learning experience. If you feel very uncomfortable in asking for the money, then this is what you need to work on right now, right? And you really have to be strict with collections, right? Like, right now you might let them slide a little bit, but you sure be paying them every week. Hey, just wondering when I'm going to get paid. What are your thoughts, right? Because what I see on the other side is that for people that, are cash strapped, if vendors are not reaching out to them, they're like, oh, they must not need it. They must not be important, right? And so what we have to do is we have to do the second thing, which is ask for the money, right? And then tips about sort of outflow, right? Now, it's we're on the opposite side, right? Oh, I always say, like, be a really great customer. And so if you've agreed to the terms, pay it on time, pay early if you can, because what we're really doing is developing relationships and developing trust, right? And that even goes with your credit card, right? We see what happens when you're late on payments. We see what happens when you don't call, and we see what happens, right? They charge you interest rate. Credit cards, they don't care, right? Most small businesses we have it in our contract that I might charge you a 4% if you're late, but do we actually do it? No. Do the credit card companies do it? Yes, right? And so really thinking about, now if, you being on the other side of that coin, right? I always think about, like, what this entire environment has made me really realize is that we're all connected. We're all interrelated in some way, shape, or form. And I tend to think of, how the money flows, right? And you really see the impact of small business owners. And, when they have to shut their doors, what does that do for not only their employees, but what that does for them personally? And so I always say, like, if you have property cash planned, you then have the funds to pay contractors, your vendors, your credit card companies, whatever it is, on time. Now, if the credit card company is allowing you to skip a payment, great, and you're able to refund all that to someone you need help with, fantastic, right? Um, and you really, really have to control the outflow of money, right? And so now that you've gotten the projections, you're saying, wow, it really looks like my outflow is very heavy compared to what's coming in, right? How can I control that outflow? Is there certain things I just don't need, right? How can I cut expenses where it's happening? Can I negotiate them? Or can I simply say, I'm really sorry, I don't have any money to pay you right now, and it looks like my business is unfortunately going this way, and I cannot actually pay you, for the next 2 months, right? What I always say, if you're gonna make those decisions, make it fast and make it once, right? Because it's really hard for people to be like, oh, is she paying me? Are they paying me? Am I, right? It creates a lot of anxiety in people. And so, and really think about, this is your chance to really think about, okay, if you have an inventory, if you have an e-commerce business, right? When should I buy that inventory so that I can make that sale, right? Or conversely, a lot of businesses are actually thriving at this moment, right? And so how can I actually use this moment in time and invest in contractors that I've never really thought about, right? Like whether it be, a video editor, or someone who works in email marketing, or, that collaboration. Because right now, I really think that, people want to help each other out, right? And so the example that I heard most recently is I was on a call with a few VC investors, and she is very well known in the investing space. And she said, there's been one hedge fund manager that I've been wanting to schedule with. I haven't been able to for the last 3 years. I've been trying to do this. But guess what? Last week, I sent her a bottle of wine and said, can we have a glass of wine over Zoom? And she said yes, on a Saturday at 2 p.m., right? People are much more open to being helpful because we are really all feeling like we're in this together. And so maybe that collaboration that you want to do that costed like $4,000, maybe they're willing to do it for a fraction of the price, right? And so really start to think about, all right, what can I do? And where is my money best spent at all times, especially right now? But I always say at all times, what is actually going to generate revenue for you? Yes, there are some necessities, but we really need to make the necessities really what I think is, there's been luxuries of time, right? Like you're buying this, you're going out to lunch, you're da-da-da-da. No one's taking out clients anywhere because we're all shelter in place, right? No one really wants you to send anything. They don't want anything, right? What they want is an income and time. Same thing, right? Those are the real luxuries of life. And so how do we, though, then really control the outflow so that each money has some sort of return, right? Like, okay, if I'm gonna work with this person, and sometimes you're making an investment hoping that that return will come, but at least you're making it full knowing that this is my intention. A lot of times what happens with small business owners is they just get going and they forget to look at what is the actual outflow. And it's like, well, this vendor wants me to pay. Well, did you need that person in the first place? Right. And so what I say, like, this has been an opportunity for some of my clients to trim the fat, right? They were way heavy in expenses anyway. And so now is the time to, say goodbye to things that you don't need, right? And really, like, you know, decide what is going to be helpful in my business and invest in that, right? So that it's not, again, all of these, what small business owners is like, oh, I have so much bills to pay and there's so much demand on that income. No, you dictate that, you project that, and you decide, okay. And maybe you decide right now that, you know what, this was a crappy business to be in anyway. I'm done. I'm going to go do something else now, right? I think a lot of what's happening right now is that a little bit for people who never wanted to face the music of, you know what, this was not a cash generating business. And so doing this analysis will be able to tell you, okay, you know what, I had such great intentions for creating this business, but it's really not doing anything for me. And it doesn't look like it's going to do anything for me in the future. So then what we then do as small business owners, we are incredibly creative. There's always something else for us that you've wanted to do that can generate revenue, that can do the very next thing, right? And so, what we want to do again is create our financial future, right? And so how to do that? Or last point I'll really leave you with this is just consistency, right? And so what happens is, so what is really coming to me a lot is we are setting new routines and we are setting new habits right now. And if we get in this as habit when, let's say, our business is not in a great position, it's going to be even a fantastic tool in our tool belt when business is better. Because what happens when we can actually fight through, the difficult times and the habits that we create right now, we then can apply that when the door starts to open again. And it will, right? It will. We don't know, is it May? Is it June? We just really don't know. It's anyone's guess at this point. But the idea being that when you're constantly, what I always say, start small, take that first step, right? It's like, okay, yes, it's going to hurt. You might be like, oh, I really don't have much to generate or much to plan for or much to discuss. There's always something to think about, something to discuss, right? Even if you have zero incoming and all the outgoing, immediately we need to stop that drain, right? And so really, the more we engage with this particular tool, the more we get into a new rhythm of doing things. And so the people that I've seen that have done very well, given these really tough times, are the ones that have been putting in this tool for their business, because you know what, they did then create that emergency savings fund for their business. They have been paying themselves consistently and then saving that money for personal emergency savings funds. And so that really changes our cycle, our business cycles, right? And it changes the way we engage, and that, business doesn't happen to us. And it's, stopping the blame of like, well, I didn't do, this or that, or the customers aren't coming, or whatever it is, right? You are the ones that decide your business's future, and you're the one that has ability to create it. And so this is really a great tool to determine the future in, in a format that allows you to take actions. So with that, I will open up for questions if anybody has any privately, or if you want to chat it to everyone or chat it to Ashley.
It looks like Lauren just came through with one. I don't have any on my end, so.
Okay. So how long does this take? Should we schedule an hour to do this every week? Typically, the first time you set up, it might take a little bit of time, a couple of hours, I would say, right? And it depends on the complexity of your business. Okay. So when things are humming, yeah, probably an hour or two, right? Every, Monday, right? You're looking at the next 6 weeks, and you're also looking at, how was last week, right? But at times it might take a few more hours. So for example, for a client of mine, they had a pipeline, right? So their revenue was going to be very consistent. And unfortunately, 30% of their business was based on hospitality. And so we had to go invoice by invoice and figure out which client was actually going to pay us, right? And then we had to go into, okay, now they actually were able to sign a new e-commerce client. So then that layered it in. So what typically would take me an hour or two took me a few hours that week because so many things changed, right? And same thing, like I said, the more you do this, the more engaged you are with this particular tool, it'll lessen the time. But in times of high volatility, which we are in right now, it means that this is something that you need to spend time on, a few hours a week. And if you feel like you don't have a few hours a week, then you definitely need to do it, right? It's almost like my meditation teacher, Light, always says this, right? If you don't have time to meditate, then you have to do it, right? It's the same thing. When our business requires us to do the hard thing, right? We have to focus our attention on that. Yes, does that take away from some other things that you're doing? Absolutely. But again, this is a business. You must generate cash flow, or else I wonder, what you're doing, right? Any other questions? Anything unclear? Anything else?
Stacey, I've been out of the loop. Are you publishing the first 3 webinars that you've done somewhere else, or?
Yeah, I think we should. What I'll
End
do.
of everything, yes. We'll put together an email and I'll have links with each one
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
conclude the April webinars. Each week, if you weren't on the earlier webinar links, we've been sending them, but if you just started in to join in, at the end, we'll conclude it and make sure that everybody gets each week for those who weren't able to make the first few.
Yep. Any other questions? Cash flow? Any thoughts on anything? Specific questions? Nothing?
I think that concludes it.
Huh?
I think that concludes it. I got nothing on my end, so.
You sure? Okay. This is the last one I'm doing on small business. So, of course, I'm here. So reach out to me if you have any more questions. And next week we'll be on personal finance budgeting, which I think, is really such a hot topic right now, as everyone's financials are looking very different these days. So please do definitely follow me on Instagram, and please do share with your friends. I would love to help as many people as possible in this medium. And hopefully I will see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.